It was May 23, 1998, more than 8,000 meters above sea level, in the brutal death zone on Mount Everest. At that altitude, every breath feels like fire, every heartbeat is a battle, and the thin air steals clarity. A team of climbers from Uzbekistan stumbled upon something, or someone, they never expected, a woman, half-conscious, curled in the snow, so fragile they could barely believe she was alive. She couldn't stand. Her hands and feet were frostbitten. She whispered over and over, don't leave me alone. I'm an American. Other climbers, including Ian Woodall and Kathy O'Dowd, dropped everything, their own summit dream, to help her. For over an hour, they tried. They gave her oxygen, hot drinks, even tried to steady her. But the mountain pushed back. The wind was merciless. Their own strength was fading. In that moment, she looked peaceful. Almost asleep. And some whispered, she is the sleeping beauty of Everest. But peace wasn't in the cards. When they finally left, she begged again, why are you doing this to me? The climbers knew staying longer meant risking their own lives. Still, their hearts broke. By the next morning, she was gone. They found her body later, clipped to the rope, frozen on the mountainside, forever part of Everest. Her name was Francys Arsentiev, the first American woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. But her climb to the top was just the beginning of a tragic, haunting story, a story about love, ambition, and how the world's highest mountain doesn't always let you come home. If you think this is just another climber's death, think again. What they found after her final words is more shocking than you can imagine. Subscribe now, so you don't miss the rest of her unforgettable, heartbreaking story. They had arrived at Everest's base camp in early 1998. For Francys and Sergei Arsentiev, that low plateau was more than just a staging ground, it was the battleground for their dream. Here in the shadow of the giant, intense pitched on glacial moraine, beneath looming icefalls and serrated ridgelines, they spent weeks acclimatizing. Their bodies, attuned to lower altitudes, had to learn the cruel lessons of low oxygen, bone-numbing cold, and the constant threat of cerebral or pulmonary edema. Unlike many commercial expeditions, the Arsentievs carried a minimalist pack. They brought the essentials, boots, ropes, sleeping bags, a few oxygen bottles only for emergencies, but they didn't plan to rely on them. Their goal was to climb Everest at its highest, hardest, purest state, without supplemental oxygen. They climbed slowly, deliberately. Every step upward was painstaking. They moved between camps, ascending to higher altitudes, then descending to lower ones, a tactic known as climb high, sleep low, so their bodies could adapt. Their route, the Northeast Ridge, from the Tibetan side. This route is notoriously unforgiving, long stretches of exposure, steep rock and ice, fierce wind, and unpredictable weather. But Sergei and Francys didn't want shortcuts. They embraced the mountain in its rawest form along the way, their partnership shone. Sergei, the seasoned Russian alpinist, quiet, strong, methodical, watched over Francys with a tenderness rooted in respect. In camp, they shared moments, sipping cold tea, looking at high ridges curling into clouds, talking about their son. From other climbers' accounts, she often laughed, encouraged others, and seemed both fearless and profoundly human. But altitude is not kind. Even with careful acclimatization, every step upward drained them. Their pace was painfully slow. Without oxygen, every inhale felt like drinking through a straw, every heartbeat thundered in their ears, every muscle burned. Days bled into nights in the tents. At times, Francys suffered headaches. There were moments when she doubted whether her body would hold. But Sergei was there, always. He would whisper encouragement, help her strap on her harness, double-check her gear. Their bond was not just emotional, it was practical, life-saving. Meanwhile, the mountain seemed to test them. Avalanches, crevasses, shifting ice. The Kumbo-like hazards crept into their reality, even on the northeast approach. They saw seracs overhead, and on some nights, heard the distant groan of ice shifting. Climbers at base camp talked about Francys and Sergei, not as reckless adventurers, but as kind, deeply focused mountaineers. Their goal was not fame. It was a mission. As they pushed higher into the mountain's upper zones, beyond Camp 4, the slog got worse. Every camp-to-camp climb was a battle, frostbite risk grew, the air grew thinner, and mental clarity faded. They knew they were entering the death zone, the part of Everest above 8,000 meters, where the body begins to break down, where nothing comes easy, and retreating is sometimes the only smart choice. Still, they pressed on. They carried minimal weight. No massive support teams. No heavy reliance on external oxygen. Their strategy was grueling, but deliberate: move slow, climb clean, trust each other. At base camp, Sherpas, support teams, and other climbers watched them. Some admired their ethic, others worried. Some said they were too risky. But Francys and Sergei believed in each other, in their preparation, in their dream. Then came May, the critical push. Their bodies, by now, had adapted in part, but not fully. They knew the window was small, precious. Too much exposure beyond a certain altitude could turn fatal. They knew the risk. But they also knew they might never forgive themselves if they didn't try. So they made the decision: enough acclimatization. Enough waiting. It was time to start their summit bid. They packed their climbing gear, secured their ropes, adjusted their oxygen rigs. They double-checked the fixed lines. They said goodbye to base camp for the push upward. And with that, Sergei and Francys left behind everything they knew, for the mountain they loved. This is the day they had trained for, the day where ambition met its rawest test. For Francys and Sergei Arsentiev, May 22, 1998 would become the pivot point between triumph and tragedy. They left their high camp before dawn, their headlamps piercing the darkness, the mountain shadowed and silent. But this was no ordinary push. Because they had chosen to climb without supplemental oxygen, they moved slowly, painfully slowly. Every breath felt like pulling smoke, every heartbeat was a drum of warning. As the sun began to climb, they ascended into the death zone, above 8,000 meters, where the air is thin, the wind merciless, and the margin for error vanishingly small. They pushed on through snow and ice, following the fixed ropes. The terrain was brutal, steep steps of rock, ledges of ice. Their bodies were screaming in protest, but their spirit carried them onward. By late afternoon, far later than most teams reached the summit, they made it. Francys stood atop Everest, the first American woman to summit without oxygen. It was a moment of awe. A moment of victory. But even celebration came with a heavy price. Because they had arrived so late in the day, dangerously late, they found themselves caught in a perilous situation. In high-altitude mountaineering, there's an unspoken rule: if you don't summit by early afternoon, turning around becomes the only sane option. The mountain doesn't wait. But Francys and Sergei had pushed past that threshold. They pressed on, holding on to their dream, even as the risk spiraled. Descending in the death zone is always the hardest part. Their strength was fading. The cold was biting, the wind unrelenting. Their pace slowed further. Hypoxia crept in, not just physically, but mentally. Judgment faltered. And then, they became separated. Sometime that evening, Francys and Sergei lost each other in the swirling wind and deep exhaustion. Two souls linked by ambition, now isolated in the most hostile place on earth. Sergei made his way down, inching toward camp, desperate to find her. He carried oxygen, medicine, everything he thought might help her. But he was running on fumes, just like her. The mountain was unforgiving. Darkness fell. Temperatures dropped. The altitude hammered at their lungs and their minds. And somewhere, in the void of that night, the Arsentiev's shared dream began to fracture. By the next morning, Sergei reached a lower camp, but there was no sign of Francys. He radioed other climbers, pleaded for help. He knew she was still up there, somewhere. With resolve that bordered on desperation, he began to climb again, upward, into danger, carrying those precious bottles of oxygen, medicine, hope. What had seemed like the greatest triumph was now turning into a nightmare. As the first light crept over the jagged ridgelines of Everest on May 23, 1998, the mountain revealed itself in its harsh truth: nothing their rewards half measures. Sergei Arsentiev, alone now, realized in that moment that his wife had not returned. The two had summited the day before, but during their descent in the death zone, where the air is thinner than breath, and the body betrays even the strongest will, they became separated. He descended, carrying precious oxygen and medicine, knowing that Francys was somewhere above. He radioed other climbers, pleading for help. The mountaineering community is steeped in a code: help when you can, but you cannot risk everything for a lost cause. Still, Sergei refused to accept that she was gone without doing everything he could. Meanwhile, at an altitude where most retreat becomes a gamble, a team of Uzbek climbers on their own summit push encountered something no one expected: Francys, semi-conscious, weak, barely clinging to life. She was frostbitten, suffering from oxygen deprivation, disoriented, a mountain spirit in human form, exposed, vulnerable. The Uzbeks tried to give her oxygen, they tied her to a fixed rope. But their own tanks were limited, their strength stretched thin. They could only help so much. Eventually, they were forced to leave her in order to save themselves. Even as they descended, one last, haunting moment happened: they saw Sergei, climbing up toward her with oxygen, medicine, and desperation. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. He vanished again into the mountain. By the morning of May 24th, a grim discovery awaited: British climber Ian Woodall and South African Cathy O'Dowd, along with others, came across Francys again, in almost the same place. She was still clipped into a fixed rope, motionless but very much alive, or so it seemed. Woodall and O'Dowd dropped their own summit attempt. For more than an hour, they did everything they could: oxygen, attempts to move her, care, tenderness, but the mountain refused to yield. They were forced to abandon her, not because they didn't want to help, but because staying longer could cost more lives. In those final moments, Francys whispered. Her words echoed in the thin air: don't leave me alone. I am an American. She was lucid at times, pleading, confused, fading in and out of consciousness. After they left, she was alone again. The mountain was cold, unyielding. As climbers passed in later seasons, they would see her body, still, peaceful, and haunting, lying there, forever part of Everest's cruel beauty. Sergei's fate remained a mystery for a long time. His last known act was climbing back into the death zone, oxygen in hand, hope in his heart, but he never returned. His body was found later, lower on the mountain, a somber testament to his loyalty and love. Francys's end came soon after. She died on the mountain, alone in that icy expanse. As dawn broke on May 24, 1998, the mountain stood silent and indifferent. High on Everest's northeastern ridge, the wind howled as if mourning what it witnessed. It was here, where no one dared linger, that Francys Arsentiev remained, unmoving, fragile, and somehow still tethered to life. Earlier the previous evening, an Uzbek expedition team had found her. They reported her standing, leaning on a rock, semi-conscious, her strength nearly gone. She had no secure grip, no harness anchoring her firmly, yet they carefully gave her oxygen, tried to warm her, and tied her off to a fixed rope. The mountain demanded everything, and they gave what they could. But their own supplies were low, their bodies fatigued. They made the agonizing choice to leave her there, in hopes that she might hold on. Then, as night fell, the mountain's cruelty deepened. In the darkness, Sergei, Francys's husband, climbed back uphill, clutching medicine and oxygen, his last known attempt to reach her. That night, he disappeared into the void. His ice axe and his rope were later found near where she lay, but he was never seen alive again. Morning came. On this cold, thin-air slope, two climbers, Ian Woodall from Britain, and Cathy O'Dowd from South Africa, along with other members of their team, encountered Francys exactly where she had been left. She was barely conscious. Her skin had gone pale, waxy, like porcelain, a heartbreaking stillness for someone who had just stood on top of the world. Woodall and O'Dowd dropped their own summit ambitions. For over an hour, they fought the elements. They offered her oxygen. They tried to move her. They tried to dress her, to make her as warm and safe as they could. But the altitude, the cold, and her condition were unrelenting. She murmured. Words came slow, broken, don't leave me alone, and then, more fiercely, I am an American. Her voice flickered in and out as if the breath in her chest was more memory than life. Kathy knelt next to her. She watched Francys, stomach up, head and legs gently drooping over the rope, as though she were resting, not fighting for her last breaths. Her hands were swollen from frostbite, her body weak beyond saving. The rescuers debated. The location was treacherous. The wind, merciless. At some point, their hope crumbled, not because they didn't want to save her, but because there simply was no safe way to bring her down. In the end, they made the wrenching decision: they would leave her. Too much risk. Too much danger. They descended, haunted by what they were leaving behind. But Francys's story did not end that day. She died there, on that ridge, still clipped to the fixed rope. Her body, delicate and still, became a haunting symbol, the sleeping beauty of Everest. Over the years, climbers began to whisper about her. Those who knew her name felt the weight of her ambition and her loss. Those who didn't, just saw a peaceful figure in the snow. For days after the discovery, the mountain whispered her story in fragments, passed between radios, base camps, and the crackling static of uncertainty. Climbers descending the north face spoke in hushed tones, "The American woman, she's gone." Others, too exhausted to process what they'd witnessed, said little at all. But by the time word reached the world below, Francys Arsentiev's name had already become part of Everest's dark mythology. At first, there was confusion. Some believed Sergei had survived, that he had made it down and was searching for his wife. Others said they'd seen his figure higher up, moving against the storm. But as hours turned to days, and days to silence, hope faded. Later, another team found his body lower on the mountain, as if he had fallen while descending after his final, desperate attempt to save her. His ice axe was still near, his rope coiled beside him. The mountain had taken them both. When the news reached the world, headlines painted her as the sleeping beauty of Everest. The name was haunting, almost cruel in its beauty. It spoke of tragedy disguised as peace, of frozen serenity masking unbearable struggle. Yet, it was a name that stayed. It fit the image the world could not forget, a woman lying still, wrapped in snow and silence, as though she had simply fallen asleep in the clouds. Media outlets scrambled for details. Who was she? Why had she risked it all? People learned that Francys wasn't just another climber chasing glory. She was a mother, an artist, a linguist, a woman who had dreamed of reaching the world's highest point, not for fame, but to prove to herself, and to her son back home, that dreams were worth chasing no matter the odds. But alongside admiration came judgment. Some accused her and Sergei of being reckless, of prioritizing ambition over safety, love over logic. Others defended them, saying Everest had always been a place where reason and passion clashed violently. No one climbs that high without knowing the risks. No one stands above the clouds without gambling with life itself. At home in the United States, Francys's family received the news with disbelief. Her son, only 11 years old, could barely understand what it meant. All he knew was that his mother had gone to climb the highest mountain on Earth and had never returned. For him, Everest wasn't a symbol of achievement, it was a thief, one that had stolen his mother and buried her story under snow and stone. For years, climbers continued to pass her body. Each one reacted differently. Some averted their eyes out of respect or fear. Some stopped briefly, whispering prayers. And a few, hardened by the mountain's cold lessons, simply walked past. Because on Everest, death is not an exception. It's part of the landscape. They called her Sleeping Beauty because of how peaceful she looked. Her skin, pale against the white frost, her features still recognizable, her hair frozen into strands that glimmered in the wind. She seemed untouched by decay, preserved by the mountain's eternal cold. It was as if Everest itself had decided to keep her, frozen in time, as a reminder of how fragile the human dream can be. But myths began to form. Some climbers claimed they could hear faint whispers in the wind near her resting place, soft, indistinct voices carried across the ridges at night. Others said they saw her shadow when storms gathered, or felt her presence when they reached the second step. These were stories born of exhaustion, of altitude, of grief, yet they spread like wildfire. On Everest, legends rise as easily as avalanches. In 2007, nearly a decade later, Ian Woodall, the same man who had tried to help Francys that fateful morning, returned. He had carried her image with him all those years, haunted by her voice, by the memory of her pleading, "Don't leave me." He called his expedition, the Tao of Everest. His goal wasn't to climb, it was to bring peace. When they found her again, she was exactly as he remembered. Her face still serene, her form still bound to the rope. Ian and his team wrapped her in an American flag, placed a note beside her, and offered a short prayer. He said he spoke to her, not as a mountaineer, but as a man who had carried her voice through every climb since that day. Then, with solemn care, they moved her body to a more sheltered place, out of sight, away from the path of future climbers. He called it a final goodbye. Afterward, Ian said something that captured the essence of Everest. "There are no heroes up here. No villains. Just people, stripped bare by the mountain." And perhaps that's the truth. On Everest, every climber faces the same test, not just of strength, but of humanity. Francys and Sergei weren't reckless dreamers. They were lovers chasing the sky, bound by ambition and love so deep that even death couldn't separate them. He died climbing toward her. She died waiting for him. And together, their story became one of the mountain's most haunting love letters. To this day, their tale lingers in the thin air above the world. When climbers pass near that section of the ridge, some say they still feel something, a stillness, a quiet sadness that doesn't belong to the wind. Maybe it's just the echo of her last words. Maybe it's the mountain remembering. Maybe it's love, frozen forever at 8,000 meters. In the years that followed Francys and Sergei Arsentiev's final climb, Everest changed. Not the mountain itself, its frozen face remained the same, but the way people saw it. The story of the sleeping beauty had left a scar deeper than any crevasse, cutting through the soul of mountaineering. It wasn't just about reaching the summit anymore. It was about what and who was lost along the way. Before Francys, Everest's dead were often faceless, anonymous silhouettes frozen into the ice. But her story was different. Her name had a face. Her tragedy had a voice. And her voice echoed across the world, forcing people to confront an uncomfortable truth: on Everest, dreams and death share the same path. As documentaries and interviews spread her story, climbers who had once seen Everest as a symbol of triumph began to see it as something else, something sacred, something haunted. Expedition leaders began to rethink what it meant to take on the mountain. No longer was it just about conquest, it was about conscience. In 1998, when news of her death broke, many asked the same question: why didn't anyone help her? It was a question that sparked outrage and guilt across the mountaineering community. Because the truth was harsh, even those who wanted to help couldn't. At that altitude above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to die. Oxygen levels drop to a third of what they are at sea level. Muscles weaken. Thoughts blur. Every step feels like drowning. In that place, called the death zone, even the smallest act of compassion can mean the difference between life and death, not for the person you're helping, but for yourself. Yet, knowing this didn't make it easier to accept. Climbers who passed Francys that morning were tormented for years. Some left the sport entirely. Others returned again and again, as if trying to balance an invisible debt. In interviews, one rescuer said, "I can still hear her voice sometimes. It doesn't go away." Her death reignited an age-old debate: does the pursuit of personal glory justify the cost of human life? On Everest, that question became painfully real. And it forced the climbing world to confront the moral weight of ambition. In the early 2000s, several mountaineering organizations began to introduce new ethics emphasizing cooperation over competition, compassion over pride. Rescue protocols improved, and climbers began to carry extra oxygen or satellite devices not just for themselves, but for others. Sherpas, who had long been the unsung heroes of the Himalayas, finally began receiving global recognition for their role as protectors, not just guides. But for every story of progress, there were reminders that the mountain still claimed lives. Over 300 climbers have died on Everest, and many still remain where they fell. Their bodies, frozen and preserved, line the route to the summit, silent witnesses to the price of human ambition. Francys was no longer alone. She had joined a tragic fraternity of dreamers who had reached too high, too far. Yet, unlike most, her story became a mirror for the rest of us, reflecting not just the mountain's brutality, but its beauty. Her life symbolized the fragile boundary between courage and recklessness, love and loss, success and tragedy. Her husband Sergei's devotion only deepened that symbolism. He could have turned back. He could have lived. But he didn't. When he realized she was stranded, he climbed back up, alone, into the thin air, against the wind, into certain death. And in that single act, he showed the world what love looks like when it defies reason. It was both heroic and heartbreaking, a devotion that cost him everything. Years later, her son Paul would speak about his mother. He said he forgave the mountain. That he understood why she climbed it. That he believed she had found peace up there, among the stars, above the clouds, closer to the sky she had always dreamed of touching. His words carried the calm of someone who had grown up in the shadow of tragedy but had found meaning in it. He once said, "My mother didn't die chasing fame. She died chasing freedom." And in a way, that's what Everest represents, freedom from fear, from limits, from the ordinary. Every climber who sets foot on that mountain knows the risk. And yet, they go, not because they want to die, but because they want to live more intensely than most ever will. The legacy of Francys Arsentiev isn't just about death on Everest. It's about the cost of dreams. It's about the human spirit's refusal to be contained by fear. And it's about how love, even in its final breath, can echo louder than silence. Her story has inspired films, books, and memorial climbs. Each retelling adds new emotion, new meaning, but the essence remains the same. When climbers prepare for Everest now, they remember her. They study her decisions. They carry her name like a quiet warning, and a blessing. Some who have reached the summit say that when the sun rises over the north face, and the wind sweeps across the ridge, they feel something in the air, a stillness, a gentleness that doesn't belong to that cruel place. They call it the Sleeping Beauty's presence. In 2023, new generations of climbers, some not even born when she perished, still speak of her as if they knew her. They carry flowers, prayer flags, or notes of remembrance. And when they descend, they leave them at the memorial walls at base camp, among the names of hundreds who never came home. Because even though the mountain forgets nothing, humanity chooses to remember. And maybe that's what her story was always meant to do, remind us that even the coldest places on earth can still hold warmth. That even in death, love leaves a trace. Long after Francys Arsentiev became known as the Sleeping Beauty of Everest, strange stories began to surface. Climbers, Sherpas, and expedition teams spoke of things they couldn't explain, voices, shadows, sensations that defied logic. To some, these tales were nothing more than hallucinations born from exhaustion and lack of oxygen. But to others, they were proof that the mountain keeps its dead close. Everest is not a graveyard in the traditional sense. There are no tombstones, no markers carved in stone. But the bodies, they remain. Frozen in positions of struggle or surrender, they are as much a part of the mountain as the ice itself. Over 300 climbers have died on its slopes, and most of them are still there, preserved by the cold. Each one tells a story. Each one guards a secret. Sherpas say the spirits of Everest do not rest. They call them the ones who wander above the clouds. These are not ghosts in the Western sense, not malevolent, not kind, just present. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes helping, sometimes warning. Some climbers have sworn they felt a hand steadying them during a storm, only to look back and see no one there. Others have heard their names whispered when no one was around. There's one story, often told at base camp, late at night, about a climber who lost his footing near the North Colonel. He was certain he was going to fall to his death. But then he felt a sudden tug on his backpack strap, pulling him back upright. When he turned, he saw a figure, a woman in blue and red, standing on the ridge above him. He blinked, and she was gone. Later, when he descended, someone showed him a photograph of Francys Arsentiev. His face went pale. He said it was her. Skeptics dismissed it as oxygen deprivation, an illusion born from stress and altitude. But even scientists can't explain why so many climbers have similar experiences, the same colors, the same sensations, the same haunting feeling of being watched from above. Some believe the mountain itself absorbs energy, memories, emotions, fear, from those who perish there. Every scream, every heartbeat, every final breath becomes part of Everest's eternal song. That's why the Sherpas perform puja ceremonies before each climb, offering food, incense, and prayer flags to appease the spirits. They believe it's the only way to climb safely, by asking permission from the souls who came before. And maybe they're right. Because for every rational explanation, there's a moment on that mountain that defies it. One climber recounted waking up in his tent near the summit camp and hearing faint singing outside. A woman's voice, soft, steady, almost comforting. He thought it was a hallucination, but when he stepped outside, he saw something strange. His prayer flag, which had been hanging limp for hours, was fluttering wildly in windless air. He turned his headlamp toward the ridge, but there was no one there. They call it Everest's memory. A phenomenon where climbers report seeing flashes of events that happened decades ago, moments replaying in their minds as if the mountain is projecting them. A man collapsing in slow motion. A woman calling for help. A rope snapping in the wind. It's as if the mountain replays its tragedies again and again, forever reminding those who dare to climb that they are guests, not conquerors. Even those who don't believe in ghosts agree that something lingers there, energy, grief, or perhaps just the echo of human will. Because no one who climbs Everest leaves unchanged. Those who survive carry the mountain inside them forever. And those who don't, remain upon it, watching through the veil of ice and snow. When Ian Woodall returned in 2007 to move Francys's body, he said the air around her felt different. Still, silent, yet heavy with presence. He said he spoke aloud to her, told her she could rest now, that her story would not be forgotten. He believed that in that moment, she finally found peace. But he also said something else, something he never explained fully. When I turned to leave, he said, it felt like someone was walking beside me. Maybe that's the mountain's way of thanking those who remember. Or maybe it's just the human heart refusing to accept that death is truly the end. Because on Everest, death isn't an ending, it's a transformation. The climbers become part of the wind, the ice, the mountain's voice. They live on as whispers, as warnings, as memories carried in every storm. And so, when the night falls over the Himalayas, and the summit glows faintly beneath the stars, perhaps, just perhaps, those who listen closely can still hear them. The laughter of the living and the sighs of the lost, blending together in the thin air of eternity. They say the mountain never forgets. And maybe, neither should we. The story of Francys Arsentiev forced the world to look at that darker side. For years, climbers had passed the dead without a second thought. On the mountain, that was simply the way of things. Once someone fell, once the frost claimed them, they became part of the landscape, another frozen reminder of nature's power. But when Francys's body appeared in photos, when her story went viral, the public reaction was shock, even outrage. How could people just walk past her, they asked. How could anyone leave her there? But those questions, simple as they sound, have no simple answers. Above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to die. Every breath burns. Every heartbeat becomes a battle. Moving another climber, even one still alive, can be impossible. To carry someone down from that altitude means risking your own life, and sometimes the lives of others. The mountain doesn't care about morality or emotion. It doesn't bend for compassion. It only takes. That is the cruel truth of Everest, and the reason it has become one of the most ethically complex places on Earth. Over the decades, climbers have faced impossible choices. Some turned back to save others, and never came down themselves. Others pressed on, guilt heavy in their hearts, haunted by the faces they left behind. The debate over what's right and what's wrong up there is one that will never truly end. Because on Everest, survival often means surrendering the parts of yourself that make you human. Francys' death wasn't the first to raise this question, nor the last. In 2006, 8 years after she perished, a climber named David Sharp was found dying in a cave near the same route. Dozens passed him, some unaware, some unable to help, some too focused on the summit to stop. His death reignited global outrage, another tragedy that mirrored Francys' fate. And once again, the world asked, what are we really climbing for? Commercial expeditions had turned Everest from a sacred challenge into an industry. Clients with little experience were paying tens of thousands of dollars to stand on the summit, guided by Sherpas who bore most of the risk. The once pristine slopes became crowded, littered with oxygen bottles, tents, and bodies frozen along the route. The Rainbow Valley, they call it now, named for the bright jackets of the fallen climbers who still lie where they fell. Francys became one of those colors for nearly a decade, a figure of haunting beauty in a place of death. And her story forced climbers to see themselves in her reflection. Because no matter how skilled, how wealthy, or how determined, anyone who ascends Everest risks the same fate. But her legacy also sparked change. In the years following her death, there was a growing call to bring dignity to the fallen. Teams began organizing recovery missions, not for profit, not for fame, but for respect. Francys Arsentiev's story ends where countless others have ended, on a ridge between earth and sky, where the air is too thin for tears and too sacred for lies. Yet her memory endures, carried not just by the wind that sweeps across the slopes but by everyone who has ever looked at Everest and felt both awe and fear in the same heartbeat. When Ian Woodall and his team buried her beneath the snow, they left a note beside her flag. It read, "Sleep well, sleeping beauty. The world will not forget you." And the world hasn't. Her story became a heartbeat that never faded, a reminder that love can defy altitude, and that even in death, some dreams burn too brightly to disappear. Her husband, Sergei, lies somewhere below her now, their paths frozen into the mountain, intertwined even in eternity. The last image of him, captured by other climbers, showed a lone figure moving upward through the storm, carrying nothing but a rope and hope. No one saw him again. But perhaps that's how he wanted it. Because when he went back for her, he wasn't climbing a mountain anymore, he was climbing toward love. In the years that followed, climbers would tell their stories around campfires, at base camps, and in homes far from the snow. They would talk of the couple who dared to dream together. The man who returned to the death zone for the woman he loved. The woman who believed she could touch the sky and live to tell it. And every time their story was told, the line between tragedy and triumph blurred just a little more. Because maybe, just maybe, what they did wasn't a failure. Maybe it was something purer, something eternal. They didn't conquer Everest. They became part of it. At base camp, prayer flags flutter in the thin wind, their colors bright against the white. Blue for the sky, white for the air, red for fire, green for water, yellow for earth. Each one carries a prayer, for safety, for forgiveness, for those who never returned. As the wind blows, the prayers are said to travel upward, to the mountain spirits, to those who still linger above. And among those whispers, somewhere high in the freezing quiet, are the names Francys and Sergei. Climbers who pass near their final resting places still speak of them in reverence. Some leave flowers, some leave tokens, a glove, a ribbon, a note. Others simply pause, close their eyes, and feel the weight of what the mountain has kept. It's said that when the wind shifts just right, you can hear something faint, not quite a voice, not quite an echo, like a sigh carried through time. Some say it's the mountain breathing. Others say it's love, frozen but not gone. The Sherpas believe that no soul truly dies on Everest. They say the mountain holds them, protects them, and in return, they protect others. Sometimes, a storm will clear unexpectedly, revealing a path where there was none. Sometimes, a climber on the brink of collapse will find sudden strength. They say those moments aren't luck, they're the spirits of the mountain, the ones who came before, lending a hand from beyond. And if that's true, then perhaps Francys and Sergei are among them now, guardians in the wind, watching over those who still dare to climb. As decades pass, the world continues to change. New technologies make climbing safer, Routes are mapped with precision, and yet, Everest remains untamed. Every season, it reminds humanity that some places cannot be mastered. That nature, in its purest form, exists not to be conquered, but to be respected. Francys' story stands as a symbol of that respect. It teaches that courage without humility can become recklessness. That love without caution can become tragedy. And yet, it also teaches something else, something deeper. That to live without dreams is to never really live at all. When her son, Paul, visited Nepal years later, he stood at the base of the mountain that took his mother. He didn't cry. Instead, he said he felt peace, as if the air itself carried her presence. He said, "I think she's still up there, watching. I think she made it, just not the way we expected." Maybe that's the truth none of us want to say aloud, that Everest isn't a place of endings, but of transformations. The climbers who perish there don't disappear. They become part of the mountain's story, etched into its ice and echoing in its storms. They live on in every footstep taken by those who follow, in every whisper of snow across the ridges, in every prayer carried by the wind. At night, when the stars burn cold above the Himalayas, the summit gleams faintly beneath them, silent, immense, eternal. And somewhere below that summit, the sleeping beauty rests. Her dream complete. Her love eternal. Her legacy unshaken. And as the wind moves through the valley, it seems to whisper words that have no language, a promise older than time itself. That love, courage, and the human spirit never truly die. They just rise, and rise, until they touch the sky. So if you ever find yourself staring at the image of Everest, or hearing the story of Francys Arsentiev again, remember this. She did not fall. She ascended. Not just the mountain, but into legend.